Welcome to Game Changers with Molly Fletcher, where we take you behind the scenes with peak performers to learn what makes them tick and discover how you can apply their lessons to your life. I'm your host, Molly Fletcher. Today's episode is a special one as I'm joined by two incredible guests, Atlanta Falcons head coach Dan Quinn, also known as DQ, and Russ Rausch, the founder of Vision Pursue. Having worked with top athletes and coaches for years as a sports agent, I've always been fascinated by the relationship between mindset and performance, and that's exactly what we're going to dig into today. Coaches like DQ recognize that mental skills training is just as important as physical strength and conditioning. Vision Pursue's mission is to dramatically improve the way people experience life by improving their mindset with mental training, mindfulness, and meditation. Their performance mindset training has helped everyone from business executives to college and pro sports teams. Before we dig in, a little on DQ. He's in his sixth season as the head coach of the Atlanta Falcons. Previously, he served on Pete Carroll's staff with the Seattle Seahawks, where they won a Super Bowl title together. After 5 seasons with the Falcons, he led the team to 2 postseason appearances, an NFC title, and a Super Bowl appearance in 2016. On today's episode, we talk about mindset, developing mental toughness, and performing under pressure. It's a fascinating conversation about peak performance that I think you're going to really enjoy and be able to apply to your own life. As a reminder, if you enjoy this podcast, please take 2 seconds and give it a rating or review. It helps other people find the show. Let's dig in. Here's my conversation with DQ and Russ Rausch. All right, well, Coach and Russ, thanks for taking a minute and jumping on. This will be a fun conversation that I know will help a lot of people, so thanks so much.
Yeah, Molly, we're pumped to be on with you as well. And so little moments like these can add up, and you'd be surprised those interactions or listening, it sparks an idea or a thought. So, yeah, we're just as pumped to learn from you as well.
Wow, this will be fun. So let's start real quick with how the two of you started working together and how did that come about? And really, what was maybe the initial goal when you guys engaged with one another?
Well, I can probably start off with this one from Russ, because I guess for me, it started in around 2013 and 14. And so at the time, I was in Seattle and, kind of for us, like as football coaches, the mindfulness approach, really probably hadn't fully come full circle. But the coach there really challenged me, Pete Carroll, who I thought was really kind of ahead of the curve in a lot of this. And he really challenged me to, could we connect deeper? Could we, find ways to look at things from a different viewpoint? And so that's really where it started for me with Russ and VP, because I'd always had, an optimist, mindset, and I definitely had self-awareness. So I was always kind of battling those two things. But visiting with Russ, and then for me, turned into there. So when I took over, here in Atlanta, then I, bridged it to our staff and then to our team and then to our rookies. And I felt, through that experience, there was like so many people that were just like I was, that were, really trying to find a way to get better. And then through the process of mindfulness, like, man, it went so deeper than that. And that's kind of how I first got connected with Russ. I don't know, Russ, if that's your version or not, but yeah, let it rip.
Yeah, that's pretty accurate. So I actually met Dan through his sister, Mary Beth, who's a very accomplished trainer in public speaking and leadership. And so that's how we connected. And the way Dan laid it out there is pretty accurate.
That's awesome. And Coach, how did you develop your own philosophy around it when you became the head coach, of course, of the Falcons?
Well, I knew, number one, that if, part of, Molly, for me, like the thing I love most about coaching is being part of a team. And so that part I've always, enjoyed so much, of like being part of a team, how it connects us, and the connection between player and coach or coach to coach that was as much fun to me as it was anything, regarding X and O's or scheme. So like that connection piece was always something, that I felt really strongly about. From a philosophy standpoint, I just knew that, if we could look after, the guys and care about them and try to, create the environment where they could really be at their best, that would help, because oftentimes in the NFL, like players specifically, man, I just don't know where I stand. And so I wanted to be, really clear to understand for them, how we feel affects how we think, and how we think affects how we feel. So like that process for the players, I wanted them to recognize, man, it's okay. Like there's tons of people that feel, exactly the same way. And if we could try to do it better, I think that would be a step in the right direction.
And Russ, you talk about the difference between, a default mindset and a performance mindset. You and certainly VP that I'm a, fan of, and I use myself as well. Can you expand on that a little bit, the default mindset, the performance mindset?
Yeah, it really comes down to automatic processes in the mind. A lot of people think about the mental game as willful and intentional, like I'm going to be more positive or optimistic or open-minded or coachable. And really what we're talking about are not those things, but how are the automatic processes in your mind working? And a little activity I love to do with people is I just tell them, hey, stop thinking for 30 seconds. Just 30 seconds.
Good luck, right?
Yeah, they see they can't do it right away. And so there's this automatic, most of us think we have a lot of control over our thinking, but in reality, there's this automatic process of thinking that's happening during our whole waking hours. And then, of course, that leads to emotions. And so it all comes down to automatic thoughts and emotions are happening all the time. The brain's set up to do that. It's set up to do it for a reason. And there's a default way that it's doing it. And you can train it to do it in a different way that's not all positive. You want to think about what went wrong and could go wrong, but in a way that I would say that's more productive. So that's what I would call a performance mindset, a mind that's been trained to automatically think and emote in ways that are more productive.
And this is really to both of you. Like, how do you get, maybe I'll start with you, Coach, guys to buy in, right? So I'm sure you've had guys, right, whether it was with Pete Carroll or now, right, that maybe don't lean right into it. How do you get them to buy into this? And there may be listeners listening thinking this is, I don't know about all this, right? How do you get the buy-in?
Yeah, I think you're on it, Molly. And I think sometimes you might hear the word like mindfulness, and you're like, well, that's soft, and that's not
right.
for me.
Sure.
But actually, like, it makes you so much mentally tougher. And so those are the things, like, who wouldn't want to be, mentally stronger and tougher? And so I think more than anything, going through, some exercises helps, just like Russ had done a moment ago. All right, hey, for the next 30 seconds, don't, think about anything. Well, like, you start thinking about it right away. And so from there, going into some processes help, whether it's an acronym of like C, where it was like separate, embrace, and evaluate. And so for us, like, it's such a powerful tool in a process to go through, like, after a loss, because that's when you need, to be mentally tougher, not go down into the dark place, like separate from the emotion. Like, this definitely took place, and yeah, it sucks, and you got to, work from it, and then evaluate. All right, now where we're going to go to here. So I think it allows you to let some thoughts pass, which aren't always, the productive ones, where, another opinion from someone else or someone from the outside can go through. Like, those are things that can really help. In fact, I'll probably tell you, I'll tell you a quick story from
Love it.
all the way back maybe in 2014. So you'll hear Russ use the word like control the controllables. And so at that time, we had a good football team, and we had been in the playoffs, and I was fortunate enough to get interviewed by, some teams for potential head coaching jobs. And so at the time, I really, wasn't interested in talking to a whole lot of people about it. But I also recognized that, like, people are coming out of the woodworks to try to get information or find out. So I can remember, like, pulling into the office at 6 a.m. and just leaving my phone in the car. And then at, 10:30 or 11 at night, you go back to the car and there's 100 texts. But it was like all little things. They're like, what can I control? And like just having the mindset to say, you know what? There's nothing more important than like being with this team and this group of guys right now. So like, whatever takes place outside or on the way, those are things I think help through Russ, like help my mindset become stronger, like make better choices, have better, decision-making processes because of things that were in my control, or how to use, my mindset in a stronger way. And so those are like, small examples, but ones that I use, to this day. It helps you become a better listener. And I think as a coach, that's a really important trait, to know that you're listening to the players or to the other coaches, or at home to your spouse, or, however, or, people with kids or families. Those are important skills that I think comes from mindfulness training.
You talked about how you've leaned into C, right? The acronym, right, that Russ and VP teaches. And I know last season was obviously a tough year on the field. You had, it probably had to have been difficult for you personally too, right? You start 1-7, but you finish 6-2. What did you learn last season, and how did you lean into this, right? And what we've both learned from Russ and VP to help you, what you clearly pivoted and lean into what I know is hopefully an upcoming strong season.
Yeah, and I'd say a lot.
Sorry.
I don't know if we have enough time, but if we did, it'd be a lot. I can hit you like on the personal side first. Like all of us, I think at times you feel like you can take on, I can do that, and I can add on to that and add on to that. And I think for me, as the head coach, like I wanted to help in so many areas, to where maybe that wasn't the best idea. The best idea was to say, how can I make the best use and the most effective use of my time with the guys? And I think as the season went on, I find, better spaces, more inclusive ways to have those moments that are really impactful during the day, whether it was with a player or with a coach, and you have to have space to do that. I think from a whole team-wise, learning to stay, like really consistent, but also have the boldness when there's time to make changes that you do it. And some of those things aren't always the easiest to do, because there's going to be a domino effect of whether it's changing people's jobs or starting lineups or how do you go. Those are things that, as leaders, that we all have to make those decisions. All right, this is what has to be done today. And I think, just having a strong mindset to say, hey, this is what has to be done right now, allows you to make those decisions more clearly. And so for me, going through processes helps me get there to where I'm really clearly thinking and really clear-headed about what needs to be done.
Well, and I think it's worth noting, as a coach, you've built the Falcons culture around, the brotherhood, right? You talk, and living in Atlanta as well. One of the things that really stood out to me is that your team never quit on you. In fact, they fought for you, and publicly they fought for you. I mean, that had to mean a lot to you.
Yeah, it had like a tremendous effect on me. I think we've all probably been part of teams where one season gone well, another one doesn't, and it usually, in this instance, you saw a shift in a team right in the middle of the year. And so to see a team, not only say they're going to want to fight for you, but definitely do it. And I think what we all learned was that, the brotherhood is built for times where it's really challenging to really push it. And maybe you don't necessarily see it in the good times. You see us talk about it, but it was really built for moments where they really had to lean on one another and lean into one another really significantly. And so to see that come through as a coach from a philosophy standpoint, that was rewarding in an otherwise really difficult year.
Yeah, it was wonderful to watch too. Russ, you work with a lot of coaches, you work with a lot of teams, you work with a lot of corporations and executives. One of the things that we often hear is, and that we see, right, is and we see it in sports so much, right, when coaches, and they face the media every week, right, and there's so much noise out there. How did you help, coach sort of through that, and your other clients? How do you help them through that?
Well, I think, all human beings are dealing with things, and especially leaders. There's so much pressure on leaders in all forms of life, and we're really not taught how to deal with that. And I would say just people need to know the basics of what the brain's doing. You don't need to go deep into it, but where are these thoughts coming from? Where do emotions come from? Why do they happen? And when you know that, you can apply a formula. And so whether it's coach or other people that I work with, it's not so much about, hey, let's talk through all this. It's apply this system that's going to help your brain process this. And we have a 3-step system. It's just really pretty basic, but it's very powerful, which is number one, you keep looking at your situation and figure out what should I expect. Based on where we're at right now, what should the next couple, 3 months look like? And so when those things happen, and you got to look for the unpleasant things, they don't bother you as much because the brain expects them. And then we already talked about separate, embrace, evaluate. And people miss that because they don't want to embrace their emotions. They only want to chase good ones. They don't want to feel bad ones. And so when you learn to embrace and the science behind opening up and feeling the emotion to let it pass when it's going to pass, that's the second step. And the third one we talked about too, which is just keep the focus on what's controllable, because the mind's going to want to focus automatically on a bunch of stuff that's not controllable. And something as simple as winning games, everybody'd like to win a game or win the account or win the sale or get their child to do what they want, but that's not very controllable. And so the answer to that question is learning those 3 steps, and then a person can apply that to whatever they're dealing with.
Mm-hmm. What other tips beyond C do you teach to help people deal with stress and with the pressure to perform and execute?
The biggest one by far for high performers who are doing things in pro sports or anything where it's really a lot of pressure and a lot of transparency like Dan's dealing with is the whole thing of embracing emotions. I was doing a talk to a high school baseball team last week, and I always do a thing where I say, if a snake comes up, a rattlesnake comes at you, what do you think you're going to feel? And, you're going to feel fear. And I ask, is that good or bad? And 70% of them said it was bad to feel fear. So they're conditioned to believe that fear is a bad thing when actually that fear obviously keeps you alive. And so the point is, I guess what I would say, the number one thing is it's okay to feel all these emotions you're feeling. The brain's doing that for a reason. And when you learn to embrace them and not try to feel a certain way, but keep focusing on what you should do regardless of how you feel, that's extremely liberating. I work with 3-point shooters, and when it's all about how you're feeling, that's tough versus, hey, I can make a 3-point shot, whether I'm feeling good or not, whether I'm warmed up or not, well or not. That's the number one thing, is be able to go with the emotions you have, embrace them, and keep executing.
Mm-hmm. No question. Coach, I've had an opportunity to spend a little bit of time with Arthur Blank, and he clearly has a ton of confidence in you, which is awesome and understandable. What leadership lessons have you learned from Arthur Blank?
Wow, a ton. I would say one, he is always available. And so how does Arthur Blank available for, this many people that really, want to pull at him and get some information. But at the end of the day, he totally recognizes it's about the people. And so that's how, from his values, that's so much of where it comes from. And so whether it's a call or a question, to find out information or, dealing with a player, there's, no time where he's not, going to make himself available for you. And he's fully present in that moment. So if he has a topic to come into, it's a really valuable skill where he can shift from, a conversation that he might have had, regarding business and be fully invested in the next few moments, with you. And I can remember, why coming to Atlanta. And he was really the driving force behind that, because he said, this guy really deserves to have a good and kick-ass football team. And I felt that right away from him. And ever since then, the support that he shows, you want to do well for him. And I think when a leader makes you feel that way, those are things that he's connecting. And so I think his ability to connect with people at all different businesses and a whole bunch of different people at different ages, from players to executives to everybody in between, having that kind of skill to navigate, the different, from a locker room to a boardroom. Not everybody has that skill set, and he certainly does.
Mm-hmm. I think it's cool. I know that you did this sort of Tell the Truth Mondays and Competition Wednesdays. Can you talk about that approach quickly? Because I think there's a lot that leaders in other roles can take from it.
Yeah, I think it's an important one. We probably need it, in our families, and we need it in our world at times. At the end of it, it's, like when we say tell the truth, like, all right, this is basically, the story to the game. And I think you don't have to come across like a jerk to do that, but you do have to say, hey, this is what happened. And this is, times the consequences for why things went so well, or, hey, here's, generally, like, here's what happened. Now, I would say that, like, negative thinking doesn't help you perform better, but I do think that you need to tell the truth. And so with that said, you have to, be able to bring up, some of the things that, like, may sting a little bit. And
right.
As a player or a coach, if you dropped a pass or there was a call that didn't go well, those are ones that you don't like, seeing in front of the team. But like the life of a professional athlete or coach, it is in front of everybody. So I would say in our world, you do get judged more than you would, if you weren't in the public eye. So knowing that and saying, hey, don't harden your heart to, the correction or harden your heart to the circumstances, that's a big thing. And so once that day is over, the day after the game, you really have to put it to rest. You have to let that separate and go, because all of your energy and mindset now needs to move forward on what's next. And so for us, generally that gets right back into the next game plan. And how do we reconnect and get, all the emotion and energy revved back up to get ready for the next opponent and the next game. And so Tell the Truth Monday is a way after the game, you put the whole thing to bed. For us, that's, we play on Sunday. So the Monday afternoon, we're on to the next. But you did go through the process of acknowledging what went well and what we need to work on, win or lose. And then from there, we really get into some themes for the week, whether it's our, competition Wednesday, where we just try to make the whole entire day about competing against one another in all forms and fashions, from meeting rooms to on the field to drills at practice, just to light that fire, around one another. That's really the theme of the program. And we get into some more themes as we get through for the week, all in helping us build up, so we can perform well on Sundays and have a confidence because of the work that you put in, that you're ready to really perform well. And those are like the most fun times out there, like when you're really ready, that you put the work in and you can't wait for the day to get there. It's like, those are the best ones. And so knowing that we really have to go through a process, to get ready, it helps.
Yeah, it's all about the process, right?
It does, because it really allows you to get there and say, man, I know I've put the work in. And like, that's where like having the mental toughness to be able to stay in the moment, whether it's in the classroom, hey man, like we got to really work at that some days. Say, all right, in the next 30 minutes, here's what we got to do. It's going to be challenging. Can you stay right in this moment of this game plan? So many people have things going on outside the building, away from the team, that can pull at your mind and allow you to lose some focus. So having some exercises for us, whether it be through meditation or through exercises, to really help us lock in for one another, that's a big deal. Because if you can show up for one another, like I may be dealing with something at home, but like my whole focus is on you and the team right now, that's a really big deal. And so recognizing that, that's half the battle. And so the kind of preparation it takes to play in the NFL and play at a high level, it takes a lot. And so you have to have all that attention and mindset for it. So it's a real process, but you get rewarded when you really, put it in the right way, to allow yourself, to play well.
We'll get right back to the show, but first, I want to share with you a free video series that I created just for you. Too often, we assume that our potential is some lofty vision hanging over our heads, but never quite attainable. But in reality, our potential is built in small moments. A pro athlete delivers a clutch performance in the biggest games because he executed it 1,000 times in practice. The same goes for you. Master the little moments so you're ready for the big moments. My free Unleash Your Potential video series walks you through 3 simple steps to move closer to what you really are capable of. To get free access, visit 5minutepotential.com. That's 5minutepotential.com. You know, Russ, you've known DQ for a while now, and you've watched him evolve as a leader. How would you describe his leadership style?
Yeah, as he was describing Mr. Blank, he was describing himself. So he really was. So Dan's number one. He's just a really optimist. He's an optimist and a positive person, and he's just a people person. And when from the people in the cafeteria to the scouts to all the coaches to the players, I mean, people love Dan because Dan's a really good human being. So first and foremost, like people will run through walls for him. Because of the type of person he is. And I don't think he evolved into that. I think that's just who he is. And as far as the evolution, I think it's just all of us as you go through and you compete at a high level, you learn, and he's constantly in a learning mode. So I think the other thing is the humility and openness to learning and new ideas. And so that's a real hallmark for him. So it's the people side, it's the mental side, it's the humility, but also, he's a badass competitor. He's an absolute competitor. And so it's a rare person that combines all those qualities, I think, but that's what I see in Dan.
For sure. And, you talk about how he stays curious and how he's always growing as a leader. And Coach, I wanted to ask you, I know you have great relationships with coaches in other sports, right? Whether it's Steve Kerr or Spoelstra. Tell me a little bit how you lean into that and how you support each other and how that translates to part of your process and to the way that you do what you do at such a high level.
I think I've been interested in watching coaches like for my whole life, growing up. And so I grew up in New Jersey. And so for me, watching Bill Parcells coach the Giants and, my youth football coaches or, and getting into high school and track and field. And so I knew early on that I wanted to teach and coach because those were the people that I just, were kind of hanging on the edge of my seat, waiting to, see what's next and how do we do things. And so when I got into college, I was I majored in elementary education to, teach elementary school and coach high school football and track and field. And so then when I got into college, I was like, okay, I'd like to do this, where it was all the time, into coaching. I loved it so much. So I would say even in college, I can remember like going to basketball practice and watching, the basketball coach there. And I didn't play basketball, but I was wanting to see him interact with other people. So we had a very successful lacrosse program where I went to school, and the same coach is still there today. And I can remember watching him interact with the players and watching him teach. And those were things that I was watching from afar as I thought, early on, that was something, that I got to see other coaches in different areas. The head lacrosse coach at Duke right now is a guy by the name of John Danowski. And so when he was the lacrosse coach at Hofstra in New York when I was coaching there, so going to watch him practice or seeing him interact with the team, those were always things that I liked a lot. Jay Wright was the basketball coach at Hofstra, so going to watch him practice or see him coaching the games. Those were things like even as a young coach coming up, I was watching and just wanted to see how they had interaction with the players, how they managed some of the moments. And so it's always been an area, that I've been curious about to see other sports just because I love to see, how people teach. And so through different connections, it's been really helpful, whether it was in spring training to go, sit on the bench, at a Major League Baseball game or, going to, a practice at an NBA game. And so having those kind of interactions and opening up to other coaches in other sports, whether it's been in rugby or guys, from Australian rules football to basketball and having those kind of contacts. I can remember for 3 years at training camp, we invited Ron Wolf, who's a Hall of Famer, as a general manager. And I said, would you just come and hang out?
Yeah.
And I'll just ask a lot of questions and let's put, some tape together. And I remember one night we watched, this is after they'd already been drafted, but Sam Darnold and Josh Rosen, two quarterbacks who were highly regarded guys. But I wanted to hear his point of view about players. And, there was things like that I would have never thought of, like, what happens when he throws an interception? Does he go try to make the tackle? There's all these little small details that if you really listen, they all add up. And so I've been really fortunate to, get to watch, some fantastic coaches. And, even when we're here in Atlanta, if we get a chance to, bring somebody up and, be around us and be a part of it. We had Spo up, a couple of years ago just to have him here for a day. And those kind of interactions, they help a lot, because although the sports are different, Molly, like the connections and the players and like how to lead guys, like that's not that different. And it might even be in business, so those are different people that you interact with. Like, man, what a kick-ass, awesome day. I learned about something that I didn't know a lot about. And how can I apply some of it to football? I just try to share it with the guys. And that's kind of how, we started with VP, with Russ. And there was an investment person named Ray Diallo who had a fantastic book that I read. And we just kind of cold called him to say, hey, would you come down? He was like, yeah, I'll be down. And so
that's amazing.
It was awesome for him to spend some time with the team and share his insight of what made him so successful. And his brutal honesty, which was like very refreshing to hear. How he ran his company was so different. And so just moments like that, Molly, I think maybe you take something really small away. You say, I think I know maybe how this could fit with the team.
Yeah. That consistent curiosity is so powerful. And I think, whether it's you with Kerr or you with Spo, but that it's so transferable to business people and leaders that are listening to be able to lean into people in other industries and other spaces, right? That you can learn so much from. And like you said, whether it's big or little, you can grow and evolve and then lead your
and
team
it might
better.
not be the technology and it might not be part of the industry. And
Yeah.
So, but it is about like, the energy that you can bring to a team. It is about, a mindset of like how far you can take something to see, to what length you're willing to go, to become great at something. And so having new ideas and, a willingness to try new things. I've always been pretty good for that. And so I think that's why, like, I have a balance of self-awareness on some aspects and, more optimism on others. And sometimes they definitely conflict with one another and get in the way. But more often than not, it leads me down a good path.
Russ, I know that DQ takes a lot of pride, right? And you're very competitive, obviously, and your toughness. You talk about that and you take pride in that, which is fantastic. How does your work build on that for DQ?
Yeah, I think for most people, there's how you want to show up and how you want to act. And there's what's going on in your brain. So what are the thoughts that are happening automatically? What are the emotions that are happening automatically? And if those are in a lot of conflict of how you want to show up, it's very hard to fight that fight all the time. If you're way up in the middle of the night and you can't sleep and you're thinking about this stuff that happened 2 months ago or 2 years ago, and then it's really hard to show up the way you want to. And Dan's a person it's funny when you talk about mindset training, out of all the people I know, he probably needs it the least, but that kind of says something about him. He's wants to get better at how to train his mind. So overall, I'd say, he's better than most people at that. I think all of us, when we can train our thoughts and emotions to be more in sync, again, not all positive, because you want to think about what went wrong and could go wrong. That's actually critically important. But it's just playing at the right duration and intensity. And you have to train to do that. You can't just decide to quit thinking about things or to quit waking up in the middle of the night ruminating. You have to train your brain to do that. So, I hope it's helped him with that, even though I would say he's naturally better. I'm certain he's naturally better than most. Well,
I would say I am, but I definitely still have the time. It's 2 a.m. and I'm like, oh, the hell with this. I'll just get up. So there's those moments like, all right, I might as well go to work, so those nights that I have those feelings too. But I think when you're talking about, the emotions where it can get, if you let it go down too far and not bring your thoughts, back to where you're at and how you're going to go about it, I think it can get away from you. And we've probably all been those thoughts where like, something bad could happen and we start thinking that it would happen. And like, you bring yourself back, like, what the hell am I thinking? I told Russ a story years ago when I was in Seattle. We were playing the Saints on a Monday night. We had a really good team, and I had like a time like, man, what if they score 40 points tonight? Like talking about like New Orleans, and I'm thinking, what am I going to do? And how, like all of a sudden I started thinking about, bad thoughts, and that's finally I'm like, what the hell am I saying right now? And it was, like totally, bringing it back to the present moment of, going, but we all have those moments where something could feel funky. And so knowing when you feel those thoughts, like it almost, the more you train, Molly, the better you get at it. And it just, you're able to recognize them faster. And I'd say there's oftentimes I may look, calm on the outside, but it's definitely like the duck above the water and under the water, like inside I might be fighting like hell. And outside I'm like, man, this guy's really got it together. But more often than not, if you have a chance to recognize those thoughts and really bring them back into them, like separate from them, all right, embrace them, and then say, all right, man, let's go do what we came to do and kick ass and do it. So like little examples of see or expect the expected, like I would generally know, like on the 4th or 5th day of training camp, the energy is going to be a little low. So going into that practice, that's a good thing. Beforehand, letting the coaches know, this is what I expect from them today. Let's make sure this doesn't happen. Or, like the controllables, things that are outside our narrative, if, what somebody writes about us or says about us, like those are things that I'm not going to get too jammed up on. I'm not going to, be able to change their opinion or rewrite an article. So I generally don't try to, call somebody out or why'd you write this or those things. Cause I know for me, what can I do about it? Not much other than go about, leading the team and, the players and the staff in the best way that we can.
So when you have a negative thought bubble up, right, and this can be for both of you, what do you do in that moment? And what do you coach people to do in that moment? If they start going down that road like you were describing in Seattle, right? What do you do in that moment to stop yourself and shift your mindset to a more positive, healthy, productive thought pattern?
I would say like number one, like totally recognize it, own it, and then let it pass. And you're like, once you do that, that helps a lot because it's not quite as easy to say like, just, don't worry about it. Don't think about it. Like, so it was like that part never got there. So for me, but I would say what I do is like, I totally recognize like, why would I even think that and let it pass. And now I can get on to the next. So like having awareness for it, almost like you're seeing something, that's not right. Or, you see trash on the floor, you pick it up, like when you have a thought like that, like do something about it, let it pass, acknowledge it. And then you can get rolling on to the next, because if you don't, it can just keep manifesting into the next and then to the next. And so for me, that's helped, knowing, embrace it, let it pass through the system, and then we're on to the next, as opposed to like hanging on to something too long, because so often it's not accurate. Just because you feel some kind of way doesn't mean it's the truth.
Yeah, no question. My grandmother used to say, don't borrow trouble.
Yeah, she's still right.
No doubt.
Still right.
Russ, what are 2 or 3 techniques maybe that we haven't touched on yet that you speak to, that you teach to, that might help our listeners?
Yeah, I'd say a couple things, going back to the question you just posed to DQ about those negative thoughts. I think one way he did a good job of describing it, I would add a little bit like what's happening. So whenever we have something that's really grabbing onto us, not just a thought, but it's really hanging on and we're feeling some triggering to it, that's a chemical that's been automatically projected in your brain. It's called a neurotransmitter. And so that's bringing a lot of awareness. Instead of saying, hey, I'm really pissed off right now, you say, I'm having a big neurotransmission right now, because that's what's happening. And what the embracing means, to go back to Dan's example of New Orleans is coming into town and man, they might hang 40 on us in national TV. Well, that's a real concern. I mean, they're a good team. And so your brain doesn't want that to happen. And so when it's saying, hey, man, like these guys are good and all that, embracing means really agreeing with it. It's just stepping aside and going, yeah, you're right. They are really good. Thanks for the message. This may sound funny because it's a weird form of self-talk, but this is what's happening in your brain. Your brain's trying to give you a message. And so you accept the message. And just like Molly, if you had a message to give me and it was important to you, and I kept blowing you off or ignoring you or getting lost in it, instead I go, yeah, Molly, tell me. What do you got to tell me? and you tell me exactly the way you want to tell me, then you're going to calm down. I got the message. And so that's the way I look at those. So I don't suppress them. I don't try to stop them. I teach people it's a message. That's all it is. So accept the message, feel the chemical. It'll start to pass. And then, like Dan says, we move into, okay, I feel this way, but what should I do? And that's number one. And then, the other thing I think is, and Dan mentioned meditation. I think, I don't overdo talking about meditation, because I think in and of itself, it's not the whole answer, but I think it's an important part of the puzzle for most people. And most people won't do it because, especially leaders and hard chargers, because their brain just simply doesn't want to do it. And so you have to train yourself to do it, even little bits at a time, because it starts to give you more control of your mind. And there really is no such thing as being good at it or bad at it. You either do it or you don't do it. So it's not about how it feels when you do it. It's about what it does for you over time. So that would be my other thing. People find some way to train their brain as opposed to thinking they can just decide to be mentally stronger. That's like saying, I've decided to be physically more fit. It's not a decision. You have to train for it. And, find a program that has multiple facets, and meditation is part of it, but maybe not the only part of it.
Mm-hmm. Which is how VP shows up, right? Which is cool. It's more than just the meditation.
Definitely.
We're trying to give people stuff in the moment that they can use that tactically changes the brain, and then some stuff outside of the moment, like meditation and those sort of things that they can apply.
Yeah, because like leading a competitor's life, there's going to be all sorts of challenges and things that are going to come up. And so like that's part of the fun of it, is knowing like if you're going to lead this life that's full of competition and challenges, like that you better have a way to navigate through those. And I think to me, that's kind of the fun part. Did you have a thought on your end in that same experience of thoughts when it's going the other way?
Because I'm a VP fan, I lean right into C, right? I lean into the expected, control the controllables. I mean, I lean into that. And I think, but it's also helping teach people that this is really normal, right? I mean, these thoughts that flow through our mind is normal. And, DQ, it's so helpful to hear somebody at your level share that you have them too. And I loved what Billy Horschel told me once when I was connecting with him, who's out on the PGA Tour. He said, he was talking about some of the things he's learned in a practice round when he played with Tiger Woods. And he said, I talked to Tiger a lot about how I tried to visualize myself, playing these holes. And I'd lay in bed at night and I'd visualize myself playing the golf course the next day, and all these just, one smoke and drive down the middle after the other, chipping it up, being in play in regulation. And then, and he'd said, I tried to visualize sort of this perfect round. And Tiger looked at Billy and he said, man, that's awesome. He said, but you know what? Visualize yourself down by one. You got a birdie 18 and you just got in the trap, and you got to get out of the trap, and you got to get up and down.
Yep.
And I loved that, right? Visualize yourself getting out of these tough moments, and doing it is equally as powerful. I think so many people think, I'm just going to visualize all the good stuff. I think we got to visualize ourselves recovering too. No
question. And I think those are the moments, the ones he's describing, or like the game's on the line right here in this moment. Like those are the ones, like as a coach, that I feel most alive. There's been many a times I'll walk out to the parking lot and my wife will say, like, are you trying to kill me? I was nearly laying on the ground at the end of the game. I was like, that was awesome, wasn't it? And so being in those moments allows, if you expect those to happen, like, hey, this is, oftentimes I'll tell the team, hey, this one's going to come right down to the end, fellas. Like, let's expect that. And so we're going to have to really be at our best at this moment, because it's way better to prepare yourself into that space, I think, than if everything's ripping across like you want it to and you can visualize it. And as a track and field athlete, like, I definitely had that part of my brain going, and I could see where it would totally play through in golf. But when there's so many moving parts, very rarely does it go as planned, certainly in football or in business or, a lot of team sports.
What advice would you have for leaders who are trying to maybe change a culture where they are? How have you done that?
Well, I think number one, like, you'd better be, really authentic to who you are. And if you're not, I think that oftentimes, gets, looked past or, seen like, God, that's not the same person I knew or the same person that's, in front of the team that's different around the staff. So like being authentic and genuine to who you are, that's good. If you're a grumpy curmudgeon person, but like, that's okay. Like that might be who you are and people would expect that from you, but don't try to be something different. Or if you're, somebody like me to try and coach in a different way, that wouldn't be effective for me. I had two really good mentors, as coaches, in the NFL. And so one you'd heard about with Pete Carroll, at Seattle. And so his, genuine energy for it, the vision for how he wanted the team to play was so clear to everyone. And I also coached at the Miami Dolphins with Nick Saban, and his vision was so clear to everyone who did it. So although they both were very clear about how they wanted the programs to run, and there was not anybody who didn't understand that, they did it in a different method. But I think if Nick had tried to run it like Pete would, he wouldn't have been as effective. And if Pete had tried to run his program like Nick did from, LSU or Miami or Alabama or Michigan State, it wouldn't have been as effective. And so I think for all the leaders, like, make sure you have a really clear vision about how you want to do it, and then stay really consistent. Because if you back off of the things that are really important to you, like, hey man, these are my non-negotiables, then, and your standard changes, well then, like, you don't really have a good standard. So I'd say, like, more than anything as the leaders, let's make sure, like, whatever the 2 or 3 things are for the vision for your organization, like, make sure you talk about them a lot and that you live them and you breathe them. Otherwise, they're not. And so I would say, assume the position of the leadership, find that, 2 or 3 things that are like so specific to what you want the organization or the team to look like, and then don't back off of that vision. And I think if you do that, you'll give yourself a really good chance. If you're authentic to who you are and how you do it, you'll have a really good chance to have great success.
So you guys have been super generous with your time. We end with rapid fire. So let's do this. I'm going to fire the questions. And why don't, Dan, you go first, and then Russ, you fire your answer right after him. Does that sound good?
Sounds good.
All right. One word to describe yourself.
Competitive.
Passionate.
One word your guys would use to describe you, Coach.
A connector.
What about your team, Russ?
Driven.
What's each of your favorite book? Your favorite book?
I read a lot, so I don't have like one that's favorite. So Russ, I'll let you rip off on that one. I don't have one that's like, this is my go-to.
Yeah, Principles, Ray Dalio, although it's a long read. It's great stuff.
Russ is going to help me with a book one day. So Molly, when we get that one,
there we go.
We'll make sure we rip that one off good.
There we go. That's awesome. Who's a person who's had the greatest influence on your career?
Pete Carroll.
And Quinn.
That's a good answer, man. Particularly right now.
It's appreciated.
What's your biggest pet peeve?
I would say like bitching and negative talk.
I guess it's waste. Just when people waste things. Inefficiency. My mind does not like inefficiency.
One thing you can't live without.
That's an awesome one. Music, I think, gives us a lot of energy, and I certainly have it around at office and at home and in the car. And so I think having that kind of energy, it can bring up some good vibes for you. So I would say I've always hoped that's part of our life.
That's cool.
Yeah, I just say oxygen. I mean, that sounds like a smart-ass answer, but I don't really have like things like that where I feel like, I got to have that. I got to have food and water and oxygen, though.
What's one thing on each of y'all's bucket list?
It's different for me. Like for me, it's, living my best life and doing what I'm doing, being around people. So it's not one moment that's gonna make it or break it for me.
You're in it right now, it sounds like.
Yep, I am.
It's funny for me. I'm struggling with the same ones you are. It's like bucket lists and dreams and stuff I don't really focus on that anymore. But, Italy is a place, traveling Italy and really spending time in Italy has always been something I wanted to do.
So the show's called Game Changers. So one last question. Who or what game changer inspires you and why?
I'll go to my favorite player growing up was Lawrence Taylor. And he was a game changer because of how his relentless attitude in playing defense was such a game changer. And so I thought, for me, that was one from the athlete side. And I think from the coaching side, I would say for me, watching up and growing and listening and seeing Bill Parcells, like that was my first, time of watching football, all I could, growing up in New Jersey. And so seeing that person and the decisions and the competition and leading a team, I think that was probably my first vision of what, a really successful pro football coach could look like. So they might have been game changers early on in my life.
That's cool.
Yeah, for me, it's Ray Dalio. When we got a chance to spend that day with him and to see what he's about and the way he's devoted himself towards awareness and mental training, and it really just spoke to me and made me feel like I was on the right track. And to be able to pick his brain along with DQ and Spo, spending that day together, that was just a real game changer for me, for sure.
Yeah, very cool guy to see how far you can take it. And he's definitely lived that, which is really cool.
Yeah, I have his book right here in front of me. It's a powerful read. It's awesome. I too endorse it. It's awesome. DQ, thank you so much. Russ, thank you so much. Where can people find out more, Russ, about VP?
Yeah, just our website, visionpursue.com is probably the best place to go. And they can check us out there, and then we're on the App Store.
Awesome. All right, guys, thanks so much.
Molly, thanks. Real pleasure being on with you and hanging out and talking about getting better. And I think, if this reaches some people that can do that, man, we're pumped to be a part of it.
Thanks, as always, for listening to Game Changers with Molly Fletcher. If you like the show, be sure to subscribe on Apple Podcasts. There you can listen to previous episodes and leave us a review, which helps other people find out about the show. For more about me, visit mollyfletcher.com. Until next time, stay curious and be bold.